I'm Nora. I live alone in a small apartment in Denver, and I work as a full-time accountant. I'm the reliable one, the stable one, the one everyone in my family calls when something breaks or someone falls behind. That's always been the story. The night this all started, I had just come back from our annual family barbecue. I was still wearing the same jeans that smelled like smoke and overcooked ribs. I kicked off my shoes, tossed my bag onto the counter, and opened my banking app out of habit. At first, I thought the screen froze. My balance showed $23. Shrugged? I stared at it for a second, blinked, and hit refresh. Same number. My stomach dropped. Not in a dramatic, panicked way. More like a slow, sick realization that something had gone terribly wrong, and I had no idea where to begin. I sat down, not even taking off my jacket, and checked the transaction history. 3 massive withdrawals, all within the last 48 hours. All from a device that had connected from my parents' Wi-Fi. It didn't make sense. I had transferred my bonus check just 3 days before. Over $14,000. Gone. No warnings. No alerts. Just gone. I stared at the screen, willing it to change. For a long time, I couldn't breathe properly. My mind kept spinning back to that barbecue, to the way my dad had said goodbye. He patted my arm, gave me that tight half-smile, and said, "Drive safe. Nora, you're the lucky one." You know, at the time, I thought it was just another awkward comment. The kind he always makes when he doesn't know what else to say. But now, it sounded different. He didn't say it like a compliment. He said it like a justification. My heart started pounding. I stood up, then sat back down. I refreshed the page again. Still, Shrugged. Shrugged. I kept thinking, no, it couldn't be them. Not them. Not my own family. And yet, somewhere deep in my gut, something shifted. Something old and quiet and buried started to stir. The truth didn't hit me all at once. It leaked in slowly. Like water under a door you didn't even realize was open. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was stunned. Like the world had tilted just enough to make everything feel unfamiliar. That was the moment I knew. My life, the one I thought was safe, steady, and mine, wasn't really mine at all. And that night, staring at that tiny number on my screen, something inside me finally broke. It didn't start with something big. It started with things that felt small, reasonable, easy to justify. My brother needed help with a down payment for a used car. It wasn't much, and he promised to pay me back within a few months. He never did, but I didn't ask. It felt rude to bring it up. Like asking for repayment would ruin the spirit of the help I gave. Then it was my cousin's tuition. Her financial aid fell through at the last minute, and she was short for that semester. My mom called, gently, saying she didn't want to pressure me but that it would mean a lot. I wired the money the same day. There was the time my dad's truck broke down and he needed $800 for repairs. The day my aunt got evicted and moved in with us. And I paid the first month of her new lease. Birthday gifts turned into rent. Gas money turned into grocery bills. I paid for 2 vet emergencies, and once for my sister's phone upgrade because hers had completely died. Looking back, I don't remember ever being asked directly. It was always phrased like a shared understanding. Like I was the one with the stable job, the nice apartment, the flexible credit score. I could handle it. And I could. That was the thing. I could handle it. So I did. They started calling me their rock. Their glue. The one they could count on when things got bad. I thought it was a compliment. I wore that label with pride. Buying dependable made me feel needed. It made me feel like I belonged. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. No one asked if it was okay anymore. They stopped checking if I had the money. Or if the timing worked. The requests came faster, shorter, and less apologetic. I remember once I got a text from my brother. Not a hello, not a how are you. Just a Venmo request for $400 labeled school stuff. I sent it. I didn't even reply. And he didn't say thank you. That pattern kept repeating. Little favors that weren't really little. Emergencies that always seemed to arrive right when I was starting to breathe a little easier. Every time I thought maybe this was the last time, another need popped up. Another moment where I reminded myself, it's family. It's what you do. Except I was the only one doing it. No one ever offered to help when I was behind on rent during my first year out of college. No one checked in when I was sick for 3 weeks and couldn't work. When my old car died in the middle of a snowstorm, I took a rideshare to the mechanic. Then walked home in the cold while answering emails on my phone. I never told anyone about that. I didn't want to sound dramatic. I didn't want to seem ungrateful. I didn't want to break the image of the strong one. Some part of me believed that if I just kept being generous, they'd notice. They'd start caring back. But that moment never came. They didn't see the strain behind the smile. The overdraft fees hidden under my steady paycheck. They didn't see the way I'd stopped buying myself groceries for a week after sending them money. They just saw someone who always said yes. And the scariest part, I stopped noticing it too. I stopped recognizing when I was crossing my own limits. Because if they weren't going to draw the line, and I didn't either, then who was left to protect me? I used to think saying yes meant I was good. That it meant I was strong enough to carry everyone. But now, thinking back, I wonder if all those yeses were really just me being too afraid to say no. I sat at my kitchen table long after the fridge had stopped humming. My laptop was still open to the banking app, the screen glowing like it was taunting me. My account balance hadn't changed. It still read $23. Sishaba. I clicked into the transaction history, thinking maybe I missed something. Maybe there was some explanation that made sense. But what I saw only made the sick feeling in my stomach worse. 3 transfers. All in large amounts. All between Friday and Sunday night. And each one routed from the same unfamiliar device ID. I clicked into the details. The IP address was listed clearly. I copied it and opened a second tab. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for until I saw it. It matched the Wi-Fi from my parents' house. Their exact address. At first, I told myself it had to be a mistake. Maybe I logged in during the reunion and something glitched. Maybe the app auto-saved my credentials. I retraced everything I did that weekend. I had helped Dad connect the television to Netflix. I had used his tablet to check my flight. But still, no one should have had access to transfer money. No one should have been able to empty my account. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding. I was trying to stay calm, to stay rational, to believe this wasn't what it looked like. But it kept looking worse. I went further back, into my credit report. Just to be safe, I hadn't checked it in months. Maybe a year. I figured I had nothing to worry about. I paid my bills on time. I didn't carry much debt. But there it was. A line I didn't recognize. A credit card issued 2 years ago under my name. From a bank I didn't use. I clicked into it. The purchases didn't match anything in my life. Streaming services I never signed up for. A flight to Florida I never took. A laptop I didn't own. And one of the first charges, a brand new iPhone shipped to my brother's address. My throat tightened. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Like the walls of my apartment were closing in. I checked the application date. 2 weeks before Christmas. That year, my family had surprised me with a group gift, a throw blanket and a candle set. I had smiled and thanked them. They had gifted me things with my own stolen credit. I called the bank that issued the card. The woman on the line was polite, but firm. She said the application had been verified using my social security number and home address. I asked if they could tell me where the IP came from. She hesitated, then said it had been traced to a residential address. I already knew what she was about to say. It was my parents' house again. My chest went numb. I couldn't feel my fingers. The woman said she could start an investigation. But I had to file a fraud report and maybe even press charges. I thanked her and hung up, my hands trembling. I stared at the wall for a long time. My mind was racing, trying to catch up to a truth it didn't want to accept. That someone in my family had used me. Not once. Not accidentally. But deliberately. Over and over again. It wasn't just my checking account. It wasn't just a favor they forgot to pay back. It was my name. My identity. My trust. And the worst part was, I couldn't even tell who had done what. Because suddenly, they all looked the same. All the little lies. All the vague stories. All the conveniently timed emergencies. It all blurred together. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overthinking. I had been robbed. And it wasn't a stranger who did it. It was someone who used to tuck me in at night. Someone who still called me honey when asking for help. Someone I had always said yes to. That was the moment everything fell apart. Not just the money. But every illusion I had about the people who were supposed to protect me. I opened a blank spreadsheet and typed family expenses into the header without thinking. It felt mechanical. Like muscle memory. I wasn't sure what I expected to find. Maybe I thought it would all look smaller once it was laid out in rows and cells. I started with what I could remember off the top of my head. My brother's car repairs. My cousin's tuition. Rent for my aunt when she got evicted. Gas cards. Grocery money. Vet bills. School supplies. Little things that had piled up over time until they didn't feel so little anymore. Then I scrolled through old text messages and bank statements. Digging for amounts. Dates. Anything that could help me trace the pattern. It didn't take long before I had over 20 entries. Each row stared back at me like its own tiny betrayal. Some were a few $100s. Others crossed into the thousands. I totaled the column. 650. That number sat in the bottom corner of the screen like a punch to the ribs. I blinked and recalculated just to be sure. Same result. I stared at it for a long time. The number didn't scare me. What scared me was how familiar it felt. Like I already knew. Deep down. This had been happening for years. None of that money had been returned. Not once. Not even in part. And not a single person had ever followed up with a plan to pay it back. Most of the time, they didn't even pretend it was a loan. They treated it like a service I provided. A subscription to being the dependable one. And I realized something else. No one ever said thank you. Not in a real, genuine way. Not one card. Not one meal bought in return. Not one moment where someone acknowledged what I had done for them. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about what they thought I was worth. Not as a person, but as a resource. I looked at the spreadsheet again. This time through different eyes. It wasn't a record of generosity. It was a receipt for being taken for granted. And I was the one who signed every charge. I opened my email and typed the word confirmation into the search bar. The results poured in like floodwater. Hundreds of receipts from places I didn't shop and services I didn't use. Some were old. Buried deep in months I barely remembered living through. Others were recent. Just days before the reunion. I clicked one from last fall. A delivery for high-end candles. Shipped to an address that wasn't mine. Another showed a subscription to 3 different streaming platforms. I didn't even own a television at the time. My chest tightened as I realized these weren't stolen in a hurry. They were curated. Planned. Comfort disguised as need. I moved to my spam folder. Buried in between retail offers and newsletters were warnings. Missed payments. Balance transfers. Late fees. An old email from a bank I never signed up for confirmed a credit limit increase on a card I didn't know existed. The card had been used every month. Mostly small purchases. Just enough to fly under the radar. One invoice stopped me. It was a furniture order. The shipping address matched my brother's new apartment. a couch, a coffee table, decorative pillows with tags labeled premium. My hands trembled. Not from rage, but from the slow, sinking certainty that this wasn't a mistake. This was method. They hadn't just dipped into my accounts. They built lives on them. I had been unknowingly financing their comfort while shrinking my own to make room. This wasn't emergency money. It was lifestyle support. I kept scrolling until I found a notice from a year ago. A debt collector had reached out about an unpaid phone bill in my name. I had ignored it, assuming it was spam. But the bill had been real. The number linked to it belonged to my sister's teenage son. It wasn't sloppy. It was precise. Quiet. Always just enough to avoid alarms. Always masked behind the word family. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. For the first time in years, I realized I wasn't unlucky. I wasn't being too sensitive. I wasn't overreacting. They didn't just use me. They counted on me, never checking, never pushing back, never believing they were capable of doing what they'd done. And they were right. Until now, I didn't tell them I was coming. I didn't want to give anyone time to come up with a story. I parked across the street like I was visiting strangers. My palms were sweating as I crossed the driveway. The folder of evidence tucked tight under my arm. My mother opened the door, still wearing her apron like it was just another Sunday afternoon. Her smile faded the second she saw my face. She stepped aside without asking what I wanted. Ricky was in his usual spot on the recliner. Television volume too low to hear. Drink in hand. He barely looked up. Darlene was stretched out on the couch, scrolling on her phone, like none of it had anything to do with her. I stood in the middle of the room. My voice was calm. Too calm. I said I knew about the bank account, the credit card, the purchases, all of it. I said I had the IP addresses, the delivery receipts, the account numbers. I waited for someone to interrupt. No one did. Then Ricky finally spoke. He let out a long sigh and said, "You're making this a bigger deal than it is." His tone was flat, bored even, like I was bringing up something inconvenient. Not criminal. Darlene didn't look up from her phone. She muttered, "You're acting like we stole your car or something. It's just money. Nora, you don't have kids. You don't have a mortgage. What do you even need it for?" My mother sat on the edge of the armrest, hands folded, like she was mediating a disagreement over dinner plans. She said, "We didn't want to ask. Honey, we figured you'd understand. You always have." I looked at all of them. No one said sorry. No one looked embarrassed. They just looked annoyed. As if I was the problem. As if I was the one who had crossed the line. I said it slowly, so they couldn't pretend they didn't hear. This wasn't borrowing. This was stealing. Ricky raised his eyebrows and said, "You never said we couldn't." He shrugged like it was common sense. Like my silence had been consent. Darlene finally looked at me. Her face was tight. Eyes narrowed. She said, "Maybe don't leave your info open next time. That's on you. Not us." I felt something crack in me. Not rage. Not sadness. Something colder. A kind of clarity I hadn't felt before. They didn't feel bad. They didn't feel anything. Because to them, I had never really been a person. I had been a resource. A backup plan. A wallet with a heartbeat. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I already knew the answer. They didn't care about what they took. They only cared that I finally noticed. The house was quiet again by the time I got back to my apartment. Menitsa. Harper. It was spending the night while Darlene ran errands or met someone, or whatever story she gave this time. Harper was curled up on the couch with her tablet, watching cartoons and eating cereal out of a mug. For a moment, it felt almost normal. She got up to use the bathroom and left the tablet unlocked. I didn't mean to snoop. I really didn't. But a notification popped up at the top of the screen. A group message. Carver Crew. I tapped it. Just once. Just to clear the bubble? That's what I told myself. But the thread opened, and I saw the names right away. Darlene. My mom. Ricky. Even a couple cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. The messages weren't old. They were from days ago. Some were even from the morning after I confronted them. One from Darlene said, "She seriously thinks we owe her a medal for doing what any decent person would do. Queen of drama strikes again." My stomach dropped. Another from Ricky girl gets a job and suddenly she's the IRS. I knew we should have cut her off when she moved to the city. Laughing emojis followed. Heart reactions. Jokes about me being paranoid. Controlling. Ungrateful. My mom had written, "She's always been too sensitive. She'll calm down once she realizes no one's impressed." I kept scrolling. Numb. Reading every message like a slap I should have seen coming. They didn't just take from me. They laughed about it. They lied to my face and then laughed behind my back. That group chat was never meant for me. But it showed me the version of myself they'd been passing around for years. Not the responsible one. Not the helper. Not the glue. To them, I was a joke. A tool. Someone to be used. Managed. Mocked. Then dismissed when I finally pushed back. I closed the app. Locked the tablet. And set it down on the coffee table like it had burned me. Harper came back into the room smiling, asking if I wanted to finish the movie. I looked at her and felt something twist deep in my chest. Not because of her, because I finally saw the truth. They hadn't changed. I just finally opened my eyes. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear. Not even from anger. I stayed awake because something inside me had shifted. And I knew I couldn't go back. By morning, I had sorted every screenshot, every email, every receipt into neat digital folders. I made copies, printed them out, and labeled each one. I didn't cry. I didn't hesitate. I got dressed like I was going to work and walked into a downtown law office with a stack of documents under my arm. The attorney was calm, older, with silver-rimmed glasses and a quiet voice. He didn't flinch when I told him everything. He flipped through the papers carefully, nodding at the timestamps, the transaction logs, the matching IP addresses. When he looked up, he said, "You have a case. A solid one." I sat there for a second, waiting for guilt to rise, waiting for doubt to creep in. But it didn't. All I felt was clarity. Cold. Clean. Necessary. We drafted the first round of notices together. Cease and desist. Identity misuse. Preliminary intent to pursue civil charges. I had them printed and sealed before I left. Each one addressed to the person who took from me and called it love. By evening, the envelopes were dropped in their respective mailboxes. I didn't send them with anger. I sent them with precision. My name was no longer up for grabs. The next day, my phone stayed quiet. But by late afternoon, my mother called. I didn't answer. A text came next. "Can we just talk? Just us? No drama. Just family." That night, I got a message from Darlene. It said, "You're blowing this up for nothing. Nobody meant to hurt you. We can fix it. You don't need to make this ugly." They weren't reaching out to apologize. They were reaching out to contain the damage. They didn't want truth. They wanted silence. They wanted me to pretend it hadn't happened. Because that was easier for them. So I sent my own message. A single line to each of them. "If this continues, I will pursue full legal action. Do not contact me unless it's through my attorney. No fluff. No explanation. No more begging to be understood." That was the day I became the villain. In their eyes. Anyway, the day I stopped being the generous one, the forgiving one, the safe one. They would tell the story later with soft voices and shaken heads. Nora just snapped. She turned cold. She turned on us. They'd forget the years of quiet sacrifices. they'd forget every time I said yes, when I should have said no. But I didn't forget. And I didn't care how they spun it. Because I finally understood that if standing up for myself made me the villain in their version of the story, so be it. At least this time. I chose the role. Mia was sitting cross-legged at my kitchen table. Legs swinging. Tongue poking out as she colored a cartoon tiger with glitter pens. The light from the window caught the shimmer in her hair. And for a moment, everything felt peaceful. Her backpack sat in the corner, zipped open just enough for a brand new iPad to peek out. And a pink phone charger coiled like a ribbon on top. I was pouring juice into her cup when she held up the tablet and said, "My mom said to thank you for this." I froze for half a second. For what I asked? She shrugged like it was obvious. The iPad. And the phone. "Mom said you gave them to me, 'cause you're the nicest." I set the juice down carefully. The corners of my mouth lifted into a half smile. I didn't answer her right away. My heart was thudding too loudly to think straight. She kept talking. Completely unaware. "Grandma said it was a surprise gift. But Mom said it's better if we don't tell you about the phone. She said you get weird about money stuff sometimes." Her tone was light. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She was just repeating what she'd been told. I looked at her. Really looked. And saw the innocence in her face. She had no idea that the tablet she held came from a credit card opened in my name without permission. No idea that her mom had lied not just to me, but to her. My stomach twisted. Not because of the money. Not even because of the lie itself. But because the lie had roots now. It had been passed down like a bedtime story. Softened. Normalized. Dressed up as love. She giggled and turned back to her coloring, humming to herself like nothing in the world was wrong. And maybe, in her world, nothing was. Because no one had told her any different. I stood by the sink, staring at the juice, slowly warming in its glass. A child was learning that lies were harmless if they kept people happy. That stealing wasn't really wrong if the person you took from stayed quiet. That being generous meant being invisible. Mia wasn't just being raised in dysfunction. She was being shaped by it. And if no one said anything, this cycle wouldn't end with me. It would grow legs. It would wear smaller shoes. It would smile through baby teeth and carry the same excuses I'd spent a lifetime swallowing. That night, after she went to bed, I sat in the dark and realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit until now. I wasn't just cleaning up after their choices. I was becoming complicit in their lessons. And that thought broke me more than any stolen dollar ever could. I showed up without calling. I didn't want a warning to give them time to spin another version. When my mother opened the door and saw me standing there, she looked surprised but stepped aside, like always. I walked past her and straight into the kitchen, where Darlene sat with a coffee mug and her phone. She looked up and gave a thin smile. "Didn't expect you." I didn't return it. I didn't sit down. I stood across from both of them and said, "I know what you told Mia. About the iPad. The phone. The card." Darlene didn't flinch. She just raised her eyebrows. "Kids say things," she said. "You know how they are." I stared at her. "She's 10. She shouldn't be carrying your secrets." My mother tried to step in. Voice soft. "Nora, maybe this isn't the time." I cut her off. "You're teaching her to lie. You're teaching her to cover for theft like it's a family game. That's not parenting. That's poisoning." Darlene rolled her eyes. She said I was being dramatic again. I pulled out the folder from my bag and placed it on the table. No raised voice. No shaking hands. Just calm. Sharp finality. "This is the legal filing. It names both of you. Financial abuse. Identity theft. Coercion. I'm done asking for decency. I'm demanding accountability." They went silent. No protests. No denial. Just stunned. Brittle stillness. They hadn't expected me to follow through. Darlene opened her mouth. but I raised a hand. Don't. Whatever you're about to say. Don't. The time for explaining passed with every lie you told through that little girl's mouth. I turned to leave. My mother whispered, "This will ruin everything." I didn't turn back. I said, "No. You already did. I'm just done pretending it didn't happen." And then I walked out, knowing there would be no more second chances. Not for them. Not for me. The silence came fast. No calls. No texts. No long voicemails laced with guilt or fake confusion. Just stillness. As if they had collectively agreed that I no longer existed. As if pretending I had never been part of them would somehow undo what they did. At first, it rattled me. I kept checking my phone out of habit, expecting at least a single word from someone. Something. Maybe a weak apology. A question. Even a fight. But nothing came. The quiet stretched into days. Then into a week. I thought the anger would come next. Or the sadness. But instead, there was something else. A strange kind of space. A slow unfurling. For so long, their voices had filled every corner of my life. Even when I wasn't with them, they lived in my mind second-guessing me. Pulling at my choices. Tying every decision to guilt or obligation. And now, for the first time, I could hear myself think. I started noticing how light my apartment felt. How much deeper I could breathe when I walked through the door. How peaceful it was to drink coffee without waiting for a crisis to arrive through a message. Their silence wasn't punishing me. It was showing me just how loud they had always been. Still, there were moments that felt hollow. Sunday mornings came with echoes I didn't expect. I'd look at the phone and remember birthdays I wasn't invited to. Group messages I had been removed from. Photos I'd never see. But those gaps felt clean. Like healed skin. Like spaces that needed to stay empty. I understood then that the silence wasn't remorse. It was control. It was a tactic. A way to say, "You went too far. Now look what you've done." It was meant to wear me down. Make me question. Make me the one to crawl back. But I didn't. Because this time, I could see it for what it was. Silence had always been their favorite weapon. Not shouting. Not slamming doors. Just cold dismissal. The kind that makes you doubt yourself. Makes you beg to be let back in. And I used to fall for it. I used to read their quiet as grief. As hurt. As love twisted in pain. But now I know better. Silence is powerful. But it only works if you fear it. I don't fear it anymore. In that space they left behind, I found something they never expected me to reach. Peace. Not the fragile kind that comes from keeping everyone happy. The kind that grows when you stop asking people to see your worth and start choosing to see it yourself. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the email arrived. The subject line was simple. For what it's worth? I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. Another automated reminder from some long-forgotten mailing list. But then I saw the sender's name. Marcy. Marcy was my cousin. The quiet one. The one who always sat near the edge of the room at family gatherings. Smiling politely. Never raising her voice. She had never commented. Never intervened. Never said much of anything over the years. I hadn't heard from her since the last Thanksgiving we both attended, where she hugged me tightly and whispered nothing at all. I clicked the message, bracing for pity or worse neutrality. But what I found was different. Her words were hesitant, but honest. She said she wasn't expecting a reply. She didn't want anything. She just wanted me to know I wasn't wrong. She wrote, "I've watched this family chew you up for years. They never saw you as a person. Just a provider. You always showed up, even when no one deserved it. Watching you finally say no, watching you stand up, it gave me the strength to rethink my silence too." I read it twice. Then a third time. By the end, my eyes stung. Not from sadness, but from something deeper. Something like recognition. like being seen after standing invisible in the center of a crowded room. That night, I sat on my couch with a blanket around my shoulders and let myself cry. Not the sharp, angry sobbing that had torn through me weeks before. This was different. This was soft. It was the kind of crying that felt like exhaling after holding your breath too long. A few days later, a white envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name, written in careful handwriting. Inside was a check for $1,200 and a note. Folded twice. No salutation. I know we've never spoken much. But I saw what happened. Years ago. You paid for things my brother should have handled. I never said thank you. So here's a piece of it. Late. But real. You were brave. It was signed by Kelly, Darlin's ex-husband's sister. Someone I barely knew. Who'd stayed in the background for years. Quietly watching. I stared at the check. But it wasn't the money that caught in my throat. It was the word brave. No one in my family had ever used that word for me. They'd called me generous, strong, reliable, difficult, cold, but never brave. Brave meant I had done something that mattered. Something worth noticing. Something worth saying out loud. I didn't deposit the check. I left it on the windowsill above my kitchen sink, where the afternoon light touched it every day. A reminder that even if most people stayed silent, some had been listening. Some had seen. And maybe that was enough. Not to erase the hurt, but to prove that truth had weight, that standing alone sometimes pulled others to their feet. That night, I wrote back to Marcy. Just a few lines. I told her thank you. Not just for the note, but for the courage it took to send it. I told her it meant more than she could possibly know. Then I sat with my tea in both hands, staring out at the soft lights of the city. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was carrying this alone. Someone else was holding a corner now. And together, even in silence, it felt a little lighter. Eugene wasn't some grand escape. It wasn't far enough from Denver to be dramatic. But it was far enough to breathe differently. The air smelled like damp leaves and pine. The streets were quieter. Slower. There was something unspoken in the way people nodded as they passed, like no one needed anything from you except space to exist. I found a small apartment above a bakery on a tree-lined street. The windows rattled when it rained, and the floor creaked in the mornings. But I loved it. I chose every item that came into that space. Every mug. Every book. Every blanket. For the first time, nothing was borrowed. Nothing was taken. And no one called to say they needed help. Most mornings, I walked to the co-op down the street or sat in the corner of a coffee shop that played soft acoustic covers of songs I hadn't heard in years. The baristas learned my name by the end of the first week. Oat milk latte. No syrup. Every day felt smaller but fuller. Like my life had been folded back into itself, without any corners missing. I didn't think about them as much anymore. Not in the sharp, rough way. Just sometimes in flashes, a smell that reminded me of my mother's house. Or a passing comment that sounded too much like my brother. But those thoughts didn't sting now. They passed like clouds. There were no more sudden requests. No texts asking for money. No guilt wrapped in emojis. No birthdays where I was expected to pay the bill just because I had the good job. There was only silence. And this time, I welcomed it. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the rooftops, I stood on my small balcony, a mug of jasmine tea warming my hands. The breeze carried the scent of rain, and something floral I couldn't name. The sky turned that deep purple blue that only seems to exist for 5 minutes each day. I looked out at the street below. Lights flickered on in living rooms I'd never enter. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. And for the first time in years, I felt no pull to be somewhere else. No invisible string tugging me back to people who never truly saw me. I took a deep breath and whispered it out loud, so only the wind would hear. I didn't lose a family. I lost a cage. And in its place, I had finally found a door. one that opened just for me. If you've ever been the one your family always called when something went wrong, I want you to know you're not alone. If you've ever been labeled the strong one, the reliable one, the one who's always got it together, then maybe, like me, you've spent years thinking love meant showing up no matter how much it cost you. Not just in money, but in energy, in trust, in peace. Have you ever been the backup plan? The emergency contact for people who never checked if you were okay, the one who got left out of the group texts, but was still expected to fix things when they fell apart. I know what it feels like to be treated like a safety net instead of a sister. A problem solver? Not a person. Sometimes. It doesn't hit you all at once. It comes in quiet moments. When you realize no one ever asked how you were doing, only if you could help. When the thanks stop coming, when the asking turns into expecting, when your silence is mistaken for agreement, and your kindness becomes something they think they're owed. And when you finally say no, when you finally draw the line, suddenly you're the problem, the villain, the one who changed. But here's the truth. You didn't change. You just stopped pretending. You stopped sacrificing your peace to keep other people comfortable. And that's not selfish. That's survival. So if this story hit something in you, a memory, a truth you've tried to bury, I want to hear it. Drop a comment. Tell me what you've carried, where you're watching from, what your silence has cost you. Because your story deserves to be heard too. And if no one else has said it to you yet, thank you for holding so much, for being brave, for finally choosing yourself. You're not a backup plan. You never were.